Welcome to Change the Narrative. I'm your host, JD Fuller, an African-American, licensed psychotherapist, professor, diversity coach, consultant, and author. We talk about the isms. We talk about the phobias, anything that marginalizes and oppresses. Everything we are not and everything we are is because of fear. Through a mental health lens, we'll have difficult conversations with celebrity guests, political activists, and everyone in between. Our mind will tell us whatever we want to believe, but the truth lives in the body, and that's where change occurs. Are you ready to change the narrative? Welcome, Dara. Thank you so much for being flexible and coming on CTN to share this space with me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciate it. You've been incredibly flexible. I just want to say that again. It means so much to me. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, I'm honored to be joining you.
Thank you. So you share a lot about your mom on social media, which is hysterical, and I love it. Talk about what it was like to grow up in your family in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Well, I mean, the thing I always start with is that we were the children of ministry. That was kind of the central identifying, unifying factor in our lives. Our lives were all about ministry and all about music. My father was a music minister, and he was also a preacher and, singer-songwriter. My mother was a singer. So our house was very musical, and it was very much centered around ministry. I had 6 brothers and sisters, and so there were just, it just was loud. It was boisterous, and it was a lot of church and a lot of Jesus and a lot of music.
So I'm a therapist, so I have to ask about birth order.
I am number 3 of 7.
3 of 7. Okay, so not quite the middle, but kind of the middle.
Oh, I'm the middle. I know. I often tell my brothers and sisters that I know everyone better than anyone knows everyone. So I know the older ones and I know the younger ones very well.
Okay, all right. What was your standout factor? As the middle child, it's often necessary to have your shtick, your standout moment or period of time. What do you think yours was?
Oh goodness, yeah, that was really important to me too. Distinguishing myself as
right.
There had to be something that made me special because it was very difficult to stand out in a household full of that many children. I was kind of the skeptic. I was kind of always the smart aleck, always sort of, cracking jokes or just questioning things, pushing against the pricks, kicking against the pricks, I guess the expression is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that was the first thing that started to make me stand out to my parents as I started to come of age.
Yeah.
Maybe even 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. Like, why are they doing this in church? And why did she say that? And why did, just questioning kind of really the authenticity of what was going on or the why of it all. That was me just questioning constantly.
So it began early on, that curiosity that has led to in so many different paths for you.
Right. Right. I was constantly being chastised for being too analytical, too opinionated, just asking too questions. It was just, it was a constant.
Oh, I can relate. I'm the youngest of 9, so I got it. I understand.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness.
I understand the need to stand out.
Yeah.
So one of the
serious.
Oh, no, it's no joke. So I love the descriptions in your bio, so I just want to understand what they mean to you. One is you are a quote-unquote vocalist and songwriter. Dara Tucker is establishing herself as one of the premier voices in contemporary music. What does this mean to you?
Well, I guess that, you asked before about standing out, in my birth order or in my family sort of dynamic. I mean, that's really, I guess, what that statement alludes to. It's the desire to stand out in my field and stand out in my vocation, my chosen vocation. It's like in the world of so-called jazz, which is the musical world that I occupy, songwriting is not necessarily highly valued. Okay. And so, for me, that distinction in and of itself, it creates a differentiation between me and many other singers within the genre, is that I am a songwriter, and I do prefer to sing my own music for the most part. And that's kind of where my leaning and my bent has been for the last many years, 5 or 6 years, is really performing my own music.
That's really interesting.
So,
I didn't know that. So thank you for sharing that.
yeah, it's the jazz is very much fixated on the Great American Songbook. And I mean, it's like, how do you, as a songwriter, how do you compete with The More I See You, or just The Way You Look Tonight, or That's All, and The Nearness of You? How do you compete with that music? It's nearly impossible to break through in terms of your own material being considered, or sitting side by side, living side by side with that material. So yeah, it presents a unique challenge as a songwriter.
I think that just was like mind blown for me. I never thought about it that way. So I appreciate that. By the way, you have an amazing voice. I mean, it's like poetry.
Oh,
It's so
thank
beautiful.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
I mean that sincerely.
Thank you.
Okay, so another one is, her eclecticism is guided by the diversity of her narrative. Talk about that.
Well, I've kind of done a few sketches around that, the eclecticism thing, and diversity just within. I mean, I say that I was definitely born and mostly raised in Tulsa, but we moved around so much. We've lived in I mean, we were moving constantly in the city. We moved 17 times before I was 21 or something.
Wow.
But we also lived in Spokane, Washington. We lived in Detroit, Michigan. I spent a lot of time with my uncle in Pasadena, California. We spent a whole lot of time in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And then my parents subsequently moved to New Jersey for a while, and then Detroit again. So we were just, we were all over the place, really. And had no real sense of. I have a couple of sketches where I'm alluding to the fact that people kind of question. Someone just did this today, kind of questioning, like, where are you from? I don't really necessarily hear a regional marker in your speech. And that was because, well, first of all, my mother was a grammatical stickler. And then secondly, because we really were not ever planted or rooted anywhere. And so I don't feel that I necessarily have a very specific point of view in terms of thought processes, or I mean, in just so many ways, it allows you, when you are able to see the world from many points of view, especially early on, it allows you to see some of the artifice. It allows you to see a lot of the construct, that is woven into our society, and it allows you to see the building blocks of culture. And you just kind of get a sneak peek behind all of it, especially if you have kind of an analytical brain, as you say that you do as well.
Right.
You're just sort of watching out for all of the particulars.
Absolutely. And so
it makes its way into my creative work as well.
Oh, how can it not? It's so embedded. People always say to me, "Can you stop?" And my answer is no. No, I cannot. I can't stop that mind from going and constantly questioning and being curious. So everything you're saying really resonates with me.
Yeah. It's when you're raised in a staunchly religious environment and you have this kind of instinct to question.
Oh man,
it's that's something that it's not congruent with the environment, and so it presents its own challenge.
Absolutely. And so, what was it like to go from Tulsa? You said Washington, Seattle, was it, and then to Detroit? Oh, Spokane. Okay. And then
that was a culture shock.
Okay.
We were we'd spent up until about 8 years old. I had spent my whole life in Tulsa, and then at 8 years old, we were in Spokane for a year. Then came back to Tulsa for probably 8 months, and then went to Detroit for 2 years. So yeah, I mean that was it was like night and day. It was extreme. I mean, Spokane at that time, I don't know if it's changed at all, but at that time it had a 2% Black population.
Oh
and then,
God.
Of course, Detroit, to go to Detroit, and my father worked for a very large church, what a lot of people would call a mega church up there, but it was Black, almost 100% Black. So to go from that extreme to the other, it was just, we were all, even my parents, we were all just kind of, it was culture shock, really.
Yeah, in the truest sense, huh? My goodness. How do you think your identity was impacted at that young age by that culture shock?
I think, it stretches you. I would like to say, oh, it made me the person that I am, and it did this and that, and it did. But at the same time, I feel like there's a lot of, there are a lot of layers of that onion that I've had to sort of peel away as
Mhm.
I've gotten older. This desire to be a bridge between cultures, that
Mm.
instinct to want to always be reaching out and helping people outside of my culture to understand who I am and who we are and where we come from. And I do a lot of that work. If you've seen my videos, you know that I do a lot of that work. That instinct is still there. But I think, just watching my parents navigate that process, watching them navigate through the waters of how they handle themselves around people of other races and cultures, and kind of deciding what my relationship with all of that would be as I got older. I think I got into some really unhealthy territory, I would say, in my teens and probably all through my 20s, and just
Okay.
grappling with that and being comfortable with who I was as just a Black person in America.
Mhm.
I dealt with a lot of frustration and a lot of questioning of, identity and, why does it have to be this way? And I don't like the way that Black people are thought of in
Mhm.
this environment. And the fact that I am judged by that, and I have to, I walk into a room and immediately someone knows who they or thinks they know who I am and where I come from and what I think and how I feel about a myriad of subjects. And so I kicked against that for a long time.
Mhm.
And so probably I would say in the last 10 or 15 years, I've had to find my equilibrium with
Mm.
all of that and kind of settle into a place that feels authentic for me. And that's part of what my work online is about. It's
Yeah, it
about
really is.
deepening my understanding of who I am and helping other people because I think there are a lot of people who can identify with that. Being
What?
Black in America is a very
Yeah.
complex thing.
Yeah, no, it's like what you're saying is like bouncing off of my brain because the minute you translated what that experience was like for you,
Mhm.
it clicked that that's what your work is about. It
Yeah.
is about navigating, two worlds, how to make sense out of it, and also sharing sort of an inside perspective on that evolution. So that's why I was like shaking my head because that really makes so much sense,
Yeah.
as you describe that and seeing what your work is. Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes
because
sense.
so many of the building blocks that formed when and you're a mental health practitioner, so I don't want to use any language that might get me in trouble. I have a younger sister she's an is it
L-
LCPC or L?
I'm an LCSW, so each state has its own letters.
Yeah, licensed clinical. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry if my sister ever listens to this. I do apologize for not knowing what your particular certification is. Licensure. I'm sorry. But those neural pathways. I think the point I'm trying to make is those neural pathways are being formed in your brain from a very early age, and it's like
Right.
that pathology of wanting to please, wanting to reach out, wanting to entreat and help people to understand who you are. And hey, I'm not some strange person. We're not that different. And
Mhm.
come over here, and let's reason together. As the scripture says, that desire, those building blocks were laid
Mhm.
very early on. The church that my
Yeah.
father was a music minister for in Tulsa, from it was off and on really through most of my childhood. But for the first 8 years, it was very mixed. It was an unusual environment in that it was very mixed. It was a white pastor who brought my father on for the specific purpose of integrating his church. He
Wow.
started the church in the late 70s, and he didn't want it to be just this lily white environment, which is a really, it's an
Yeah.
admirable goal when you think
Sure.
about it, especially for that time. But he brought my father on because he said music, people are drawn to music. And if the music is good and if it's got some soul, then we're going to be able to attract some different folks. And so then that put us in a unique position. We were children of a minister who was, had a prominent position within the church. So we were being watched very closely all the time. It was like, you have to comport yourself in this very particular way and, follow the rules. And our mother was very strict in terms of behavior, which I knew a lot of that, those sketches around, how strict my mother was in terms of how we spoke. We didn't get to run up and down the aisles of the church with the rest of the children. There were different rules for us.
Right. Which Dara,
this environment.
Which I just want to add, which prepared you for life, different rules.
Yes, absolutely. I do feel like I was better prepared for the realities of what the world is about from an early age. I mean, I knew kids when I was in college, African American kids, and that was a very segregated experience that I wasn't ready for. But I knew, friends of mine in college who were Black who didn't even realize that Black people only made up 12 or 13% of the population because they came from larger cities and they were surrounded by Black folks all the time. And it was just like they had no consciousness, no awareness of like, no, we're actually a pretty small portion of the population. But for me, I was extremely aware of that, of being in the minority.
Right. And yet today we are actually a global majority and we're having difficulty wrapping ourselves around that because of exactly what you explained.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. All right. So I want to ask one more question, then I'm going to shift gears kind of about, like where you've come from. Have you had your greatest fall and your greatest comeback?
Greatest fall and greatest comeback. I don't think my life has really contained quite that level of drama. I don't think.
Nothing wrong with that.
I feel like I'm kind of perpetually on this path to like, where is this great moment? When does this great moment happen? I've definitely had some really cool experiences. I can point to a lot of, really fun experiences and a lot of really crappy experiences. But I don't feel like I've hit an apex particularly. My 20s were just rough. When I look back on my 20s and just what it meant to exist in my body and in my mind, that just felt like a low point that I would not want to go back to.
All right. I think look, we all have our own version, and I think that speaks to it. That's enough. Yeah. So let's get onto your social media a little bit. When did satire and social commentary take up such a prominent position in your life? How did that happen and why?
Well, I've always been a lover of satire. I've always been a lover of comedy. I remember discovering Saturday Night Live on my own, like because we grew up in such a strict household, Christian household, we weren't allowed to watch anything or listen to anything, not even secular music. And so I was finding all this stuff on my own. I was finding all the artists that I was interested in and sneaking a radio under my pillow on my own. No one was telling me about Nat King Cole or anyone. And no one told me what Saturday Night Live was. I didn't know. And so I was probably 13 and turned on the television and I saw Dana Carvey and Mike Myers and Victoria Jackson and John Lovitz in a sketch. And my head just exploded. I mean, and then I would turn on the radio and I was one of those that would just sit and listen to these in between stations, whatever little, crate digging I could do, quote unquote, on the radio. And I found a show called Dr. Demento that was all satirical music. Okay. It was all like novelty songs and satire music. And, I would find these little nooks and crannies wherever I could. I was always drawn to satire. And so as far as me getting into that myself, it was always something that I would do just kind of around the house, just kind of joking or whatever. And I always felt like I wanted to be able to express that. I felt like in another life, I might have auditioned for some sort of comedy troupe or something. And so I knew in the back of my mind, it was like, man, when I started seeing these types of sketches pop up online, I'm like, I could do that. I could do that. And so I sort of dipped my toe, slowly but surely. I had my husband in a couple sketches with me, and then I just kind of launched out on my own and, gave myself permission to just be silly, really.
Yeah.
And with a message.
That's great. I love that. So one of my favorite commentaries that I hope went viral, I don't know if it did or not, is your activism for Eric Monte. Can you talk about that?
Oh yeah. That actually, yeah, that got around more so on Instagram than TikTok for some reason. But yes, Eric Monte was a writer for Good Times, and he wrote the movie Cooling High, and that was turned into a television show called What's Happening, which is based upon his life. But he was sort of edged out of that opportunity to be a part of that show, and was really, according to him, was really treated pretty badly by Norman Lear and others because he pushed for, the type of representation that he wanted on shows like Good Times. He said that the concept of the Jeffersons, or the characters of George and Louise Jefferson, were characters that he came up with and fed to Norman Lear, and this all happened kind of in the early 70s. But Norman Lear ended up executing a lot of these ideas independent of Eric Monte. And Cabrini Green, where Good Times is set, is where Eric Monte grew up. It's based upon his actual life. And so, I had heard kind of inklings of his story over the years, but I had never really paid a lot of attention to it. And someone in my comments section kind of, pointed me to that. They're like, hey, you should probably, I did another video, and then that comment section, they told me, well, you should probably, look into the story of Eric Monte. And I thought, oh yeah, that, I kind of had dismissed it. The idea that this could have been, Norman Lear stole these ideas. It's like, well, Norman Lear's this legendary producer. Why does he need to steal ideas from people? But I, did some digging into it, and I really tried to frame that story in a way that allowed Eric Monte to speak for himself. He feels like there was a real element of racism involved in it. I didn't feel the need to make any specific commentary around that myself, but I wanted to allow his voice to be heard. And so it was a little bit of towing the line, because even now, there are parts of that story that, I have to question. He says he came up with the idea of bringing Fred, what's his name, the comedian that played Fred Sanford. Red Fox.
Yeah, right. Red Fox, right.
Yeah, of using Red Fox and Sanford and Son. And then he, had something to say about possibly contributing to the development of the Cosby Show. And I'm like, well, I don't know what elements of this are exaggerated, in his own memory are blown up to be what they were. I really don't. But I do know that he contributed positively to the culture, and that he was done wrong. Norman Lear ended up suing Norman Lear and others, and he was given a $1 million settlement, which he really had a lot more coming to him. So there is some truth in what he was saying. And he, I found out later on, someone contacted me and said, hey, I know Eric Monte, and yes, he's pretty destitute at this point. He's dealt with drug and alcohol addiction, and he's still not in a very good state. And so I was able to kind of spearhead a fundraiser, and folks got behind it and raised about $30,000 to help to get them into, a better assisted living facility. So that's been pretty significant. One of the most significant efforts that I've been involved in on TikTok.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm just, it just kind of blows me away that people would be moved enough to want to make a difference in his life.
I've heard often that people want to, they don't know how to, and you made it so easy for them to. It really facilitated the process. The other thing is that it was a narrative for a human story. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just about whether or not elements of his story were accurate or not. It's happened over and over again. It was a theme. So you really humanized an experience, and you allowed people to have some accountability for it. And that's what made it so powerful,
Yeah, it was cool, because it was kind of funny, because I had certain people in the comment section just like, well, we're going to go over to Norman Lear's. Well, I left some nasty comments on Norman Lear's page. I'm like, that's not going to help anything. I mean, I'm sure Norman Lear has his side of the story, and what he feels like happened and how it transpired. And, the man is 99 years old. It's highly doubtful that there's going to be any sort of real conversation or restitution around that where he's concerned. But what we could do proactively was help Eric. And, I did get the feeling that Eric was the type that probably got, as they like to say, got in his own way a lot, and was one of his own worst enemies. And there's a lot more than the Norman Lear situation that I'm sure has contributed to why he is where he is now in life.
Sure.
So I do understand it's a complex issue, but it just, there just came a point where I was like, well, how could I not offer to do something if I know this man? He's still alive, for goodness sake. That was the first shock. He's still,
Right.
he's, dealt with drug addiction, homelessness for years, and is still out there. And once I learned that, and once I had a reach out from somebody who had a connection to him, where it was like, all right, jump on it quickly, because you want to, be able to seize the moment when people are still thinking about it and are still moved by it. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
You do this a lot. You find the thing that we didn't know about, and you bring it to light, and in a way that's user friendly. And I don't have time to go over all of the ones that I think are amazing, but I do have to say my second favorite is the deflection doll. I'd like to know. I'd like to know when that's going to be available for purchase around the holidays. Talk about the deflection doll. I must have reposted it about 4 times.
For those who are real diehards, the deflection doll actually made another appearance in a very recent sketch of mine in this week. So if you remember Deflection Doll, you may see her make a little cameo in another sketch.
Right on.
But no, Deflection Doll, I think, I had done another sort of, when we were kids, there were these, hey, Time Life presents this treasury of music or whatever. And then all the credits would scroll by and it would be Dean Martin singing his greatest hits or whatever. So I decided to do it in that style. And I had done another video like that last year, called Progress Blockers, and they were shades that you could put on to block out all the progress you made and take you back to 30 years ago.
I forgot about that one. I forgot. That was another great one.
Yeah. And so I think it was probably a conversation under that sketch that sparked the idea for Deflection Doll. So yeah, she's just the doll. You can pull her string and she just gives you all sorts of deflections to throw out there when you're hearing things that you don't want to have to deal with. So she's a sympathetic character, I think.
So after, when this podcast drops, you're gonna have to post all of these again, because so good. And you don't always have time to scroll through and find them, but those, you kind of want to guide people because they're just so good.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah,
I love doing that. That really is my favorite. Like I said, the satirical stuff where I can really do kind of that Saturday Night Live style production and just execute an idea. It's my absolute favorite thing to do.
Well, in both of those, what's so funny about it is, you have this way of coming across like it's going to be so serious. And then you get to it, it's like, oh my God, I didn't see that coming.
The most fun with those sketches is all the hokey faces that you get to make. You're just so frustrated, like the folks in the infomercials who are just constantly, fumbling with tomatoes that they can't cut or whatever. It's just,
right. No, that's good. It's good stuff. So let's talk about your podcast before we wrap up. I'm all over the place. Talk about the episode in particular that had to do with cultural appropriation, please, because I think that's a theme of what you do on the show.
Yeah, I think that's one of the more difficult subjects for a lot of white folks to get their heads around. I can't say that Black folks really have a difficult time with this. And it's so interesting to me, the cultural divide there between even just, these two groups and their ability to even understand what this is and why it is problematic. The whole concept of a majority culture, which is really how cultural appropriation is defined, a majority culture that is profiting in some way, either socially or financially, is profiting from the culture of a minority group. And, it sparks when I do videos around this kind of thing, it sparks a lot of conversation. If I do videos around what's called digital blackface, this is another really form of cultural appropriation. Those are some of the videos that get the most traction. Because people have a lot of curiosity about it. A lot of people have a very reflexively just angry or defiant, indignant reaction to the idea that, we just can't have everything that we want to have. This is, music belongs to everyone. And so, you're gatekeeping, and a classic deflection doll line. This
Yes.
is gatekeeping. And, but to help people to understand, especially in the United States, to help people to understand even the concept of culture, which is a little bit of what I got into later on in that video about cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. What is culture? In the United States, at least, it's not really something that's understood well, and certainly not understood from the standpoint of, Black Americans possessing our, having a sense of culture that is uniquely ours. We're seen as just a subset of American culture. You happen to be here, and fine, you're doing what you're doing. So, we're all in this together, and we're just going to grab this if we want it. We like what you're doing, and we're going to take it and do it. And who says we can't?
Yeah.
There's not that consciousness of the way that you would approach any other culture to say, hey, I respect the history here, and I want to be a part of this, and may I respectfully participate. There's no such approach with Black American culture, because it's not truly acknowledged as being its own distinct culture. So I think introducing these concepts to people, it helps to lay the groundwork, for them to understand maybe why Black people might have this reflexively, angry response to people like Elvis and others who have made a living profiting from Black culture. But a lot of white folks don't. A lot of white folks don't even know that Black people have a problem with Elvis Presley. They do not know that. They don't even have any awareness of it. And if you say it, it's the most sacrilegious thing ever.
Yeah.
So that's one of the videos I've had the most resistance to.
Understood. So talk about your podcast and what are the other themes that you kind of bring up and talk about? Try to cover.
Well, we'll usually discuss one of my videos that's kind of had a lot of traction lately, and so the next one we'll do will probably be what's the most recent one we did? Oh, the whole kerfuffle around The Little Mermaid. And, yeah. And so I just did a video that was the top 10 films where white people have played people of color. And of course, it just does not occur to them necessarily, a lot of them necessarily, that this has been done a lot throughout the decades. And so we'll usually take a theme of one of the videos that I've done recently and just kind of break it down even further. And I do that with my husband, Greg, and we'll just have kind of a deep dive conversation into those things. Because a lot of people, they have follow-up questions that they want asked, and I can't get into it all in the 3 to 6 minute video. And so it's a really, really cool opportunity for me to just expound on those subjects further. And then sometimes I'll show sketches or whatever, and sometimes I'll include my music as well. I'll play a little clip of my music, because not a lot of people know that I actually am a singer, and that's what I do. So
I can't believe that. That's what I knew first. So first, let me say that I said it before. I'll say it again. You are so incredibly talented as a musician, and
Thank you.
I mean that. Yeah, I mean that sincerely. I'm just so impressed with, raw talent that turns into something else. For my lack of musicianship, I can't really articulate it clearly, but there is a raw talent there, and you can just see it, grow as you add pieces to it. And it's really incredible. So I want to say that very clearly, even if I say it inarticulately.
It's okay.
And and I love the fact that you really care about teaching people the truth, whether it's your truth, the truth of history. I appreciate your knowledge, and I just want to thank you so much for coming on. And I want you to tell people where they can find you, either performing, purchase your music, see your podcast, your social media handles, all of that right now as we wrap up, please.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, JD. I've enjoyed myself as well. I appreciate these questions that go in depth and are not just a rehashing of my Wikipedia entry. So this has been fun for me too. But I'm on, if you're looking for my music, it's on all digital music platforms, but it's under Dara Tucker. And I've tried to get that changed for a while now. So I've gone by Dara Starr Tucker for a while, and but that's a difficult process. And so you'll have to find me under Dara Tucker on platforms like Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you find music. But we are working on an album right now. And so that'll be out in the spring of next year. But we just put something out, I think last year. Yeah, last year we put something out. So you can find my music under Dara Tucker. And then online, I'm Dara Starr Tucker. And that's, I've been having a little bit of a back and forth with one of my heroes who's India Ari lately. And she has a podcast herself. And she told me, she's like, you need a little hook to tell people how to find you. You say Dara with one R and Star with two or something. She's very good at these little catchy sort of, aphorisms or whatever. But yeah, Dara with one R and Star with two. So thank you. Yeah. So Dara Starr Tucker, Twitter, I'm on YouTube, I'm on TikTok. Instagram is Dara Tucker B. And that's the one that's a little different, but I'm on Facebook, all the major social media platforms I'm on. And then the podcast is called I'm All Over the Place with Dara Starr Tucker. So yeah, I'm doing a lot, and all those links are in my bio on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, one more, Linktree. What's your Linktree?
Yes, Linktree. That's yes, my Linktree is, I don't know exactly what it is. Is Dara
Okay,
Tucker,
we'll make sure we put it.
Yeah,
Starr. Okay.
Yeah, Dara Starr Tucker, but that's in my bio on Instagram and TikTok, and that's where it'll lead you to everything.
Perfect. I just want to make sure I got them all in. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm on Patreon as well. I always forget to mention the Patreon, but I do have a Patreon. And actually, I'm shocked anytime I see people sign up for that. But that's the coolest thing to me, because it's like, hey, we want to support you, and like we want you to actually be able to continue to do what you do. So love my Patreon.
So the other thing is any upcoming performances? Any shows
I don't really have anything on the docket right now. Like I said, we just moved. Okay. And Greg, who is normally the guy that books our shows, he's my husband, is a radio broadcaster. So he's really focused on that right now, and we are focused on recording the album. And so we're in a state of flux, like the move, him starting this new position, and then recording the project. So we're sitting our butts down right now and actually regrouping.
Excellent.
Hopefully we'll be back out there. But I would think by, in a couple months, we'll be back out there, and definitely by the spring, because we'll have an album to promote. So yeah,
sounds great.
Stay tuned for schedule notices.
Final word. This was amazing. Thank you so much. I loved getting to know you more. And I want to give you the final word as we exit.
Oh, I'm just so appreciative, honestly, for your appreciation, JD. It really feels good when people hear you and understand where you're coming from, and to go back to the theme, that we discussed in the beginning about significance and creating some sort of distinction for yourself. I guess I will never be beyond the desire to distinguish myself in some way. And, in so many different fields, it's a constant push on my part, and probably a neurosis, I guess. And again, I'm using your terminology probably completely incorrectly.
No, not incorrectly.
But whether it's healthy or unhealthy, I appreciate people who plug in and who help me to feel that I'm actually on the right path, and that I am being somewhat effective. And you're one of those people, so I so appreciate that. Thank you so much, JD.
All right. Thank you again. And I'll be in touch. So good luck with your move and all the changes and things that are happening. And I'll make sure I stay tuned. Thank you, Dara. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, JD.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.